Eric's in charge of Panda and Dolphin Cookies.
Dolphin cookies.
Mhm.
I don't know about that one.
Well, you just been on.
Folks, for
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, tonight we're gathered tonight for our finance committee. That is March 27th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Mr. Britnoff, will please have a roll call?
Yes, Ms. Cheney is absent. Mr. Fisher,
Here,
Mr. Knipp,
here.
Mr. Marks,
Here.
Ms. Snyder.
Can I have a motion to, so moved?
Second.
All in
Aye.
favor? Very good.
You're on the receiving end there.
Very good. All right. We do not have the police department here today, so
Motion to excuse.
do we have to excuse
No,
them?
they aren't on the agenda.
I'll make a motion to excuse Miss Cheney. No?
We
We
did.
already did.
Oh, you did?
We did
Sorry.
second.
Definitely wasn't paying attention.
It was done in code.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we had last meeting's
Good job.
minutes approved. Did everybody have a chance to review it?
Point of order, we have
Do I have a
to
motion to
Hold it.
approve?
we have to approve the agenda first.
Oh,
Yes.
motion to approve the agenda?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The agenda is adopted as presented. Minute, could we please have the motion to approve the minutes from, wow,
November,
2nd,
yes.
2022.
Motion to approve previous minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So,
Three, yes.
With
Next,
your
we have the
permission.
2023 financial report. Mr. Finley of our Manor.
thank you for that lovely introduction, Mr. Fisher. You may or may not have in front of you the finance packets from November, December, January, and February. Quite unusual that we would do 4 packets at once. Typically, we would do 3 packets at once at the February meeting, or 2 packets at the January meeting, if so needed. It happens to be this year, we had to truncate all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the November and the January packets, as they are pretty much redundant. Once we have December, we have the year end, we have the closeout. That makes things a lot simpler. And then for where we're sitting now, I will go over February again, because we have that information in front of us. I encourage you to go over the finance packets. It is a function of our audit, which we just met the audit committee just earlier today. So I will go over December of 2022. For the month of December fiscal year 22, the village had a combined bank balance of $3,439,774.41. Of this amount, just over 2.8 million was found in the village's primary checking account, while the rest of that balance resides in several village dedicated funds. More information on that with any questions, although we have discussed that many times. For the month of December, the village generated $69,307.97 in general fund income tax receipts. That was just north of $8,000 more than December of the previous year. For the year, the village has generated $950,000 in general fund income tax receipts for fiscal year 22. That is a record. Those collections are $13,000 more than the end of fiscal year 2021. That's a 1.47% ahead of the previous, again, record-breaking year. The previous record-breaking year was like 10% higher. So the fact that we saw a 10% increase and now another 1.5 is just unreal. I mean, again, the testament to the usage of RETA as a resource to collect income tax in the village, I think, cannot be underestimated. The village already received the second biannual disbursement of real estate taxes. That did not change. That was actually received in August. So for village receipts, the village received 29 payments in December that total $120,589.47. 8,000. Something that I would like to introduce, and I introduced already back in December, I think even back in November, is I'd like to track the DEA program so that people can see that money is still rolling in on that program. We'll get there. 8,000 was received in the month of December. Yes, in the month of December. Yes. Don't want to get confused here. For 2022, the village collected $795,000 more in general fund revenue than in it's fiscal year 21. So pretty significant. Top 5 payment payees for the month were payroll, DPS, Rumpke, Ohio Police and Fire, and Jefferson Health Plan. Those are pretty typical, pretty expected. That just means we didn't have any major expenses above those, no property purchases, anything of that sort. As for appropriations, the total village general fund spend for the month was 66 cleared payments, the amount of $221,345.61. That figure is just $21,000 more than what was spent in fiscal year 21. Again, anytime you see an increase in spend over the previous year until the end of these reports, as long as it's less than $45,000, that's pretty much you can attribute to DPS and that we're actually beneath where we were the previous year. Once you include DPS, it just totally skews the figures. Once we start talking about March this year, which will be next financial meeting, financial committee, that will start to reflect a real dollar-to-dollar comparison where we are spending money month to month compared to 22. The village had 43 outstanding payments. Again, that just means that they were not cashed yet. The total $121,105.89. That number did include the payment to DPS, hence why it's so much bigger. Again, the village administration will continue to monitor expenses. And that is the end of December. The thing to kind of be aware of is the general fund balance at the end of December 21 was just north of $927,000. And the end general fund balance at December 22 was just north of $1 million. So that means that we had an increase in our reserve by about $86,881.22 to be precise. So very, very helpful to know that. The things to be,
What do we attribute this to?
so the things to be aware of on that is that does include some money that we have received from the county. We received around $250,000 from Hamilton County for the purchase of real estate, which was purchased. And of course, then the mitigation factors and other demolition, et cetera. Not all of that money has been spent. In fact, about $160,000 has been spent, leaving about $90,000 extra. So what that means in real dollars is that our general fund is not $86,000 in the black. It's just about where it should be.
Right.
It's just about where it should be. So it's not that we have $86,000 extra. It's that we have exactly how many dollars we thought we would have and how much we spent compared to how much we spent in the general fund. So it's a very good position to be in. But we shouldn't, think, wow, let's buy, a new swimming pool or something like that. I don't know. That would be ridiculous.
You gotta go there.
I'm just saying.
You gotta go there.
Everyone was thinking it. I'm just kidding. Only I was thinking it. I wish we had a pool so bad. Anyway, so that is the end of fiscal year 22. There is, for your absolutely fascinating reading, if you're really into it, if you look on tonight's agenda, not in the agenda, but on tonight's on tonight's council packet, the 2022 year-end financial reporting report that was submitted to the auditor was the last item on that list, and it's about 15 pages of where we are with all of our loans, where we are with all of our road projects. It's information that so you see the bank balances on there, where's the general fund. It's all things that you would expect to see in an annual finance report.
This is
no
on
surprise.
tonight's agenda, by the way.
I'm sorry.
This report's on tonight's agenda.
Correct.
Here.
I'm saying, so what we just went over,
Yep.
The finance report, which, I just did the finance packet for December.
Right.
Essentially, we're hitting that year end, which goes over the same things. The difference being that if I pull up the year end report, so once you get past the first 3 pages, which are just, again, where did we get the money from?
Mhm.
Where did it go to? Which should be no surprises. You guys saw the budget. You guys saw the appropriations. Again, it goes over on page 3. It shows you the general fund where it is, where it was last year. So then there's a lot of definitions. There's a lot of things in here which are not really relevant to us. It's relevant to the document. You have to know how to read the document. That's much of what's on here. But again, just the budgetary activity giving you specific bullet points of what's happening. Where are we with our risk management? Again, I reported numbers from the Ohio plan, excuse me. That is not a Gulf Manor issue. That's over on page 8 of the document, 11 of the 11 out of 15. So that's just, those are like the different organizations that we have agreements with. There was another one on OPERS, another one on Ohio Police and Fire. Again, these are just what are the member rates that you're required to contribute as opposed to what we do contribute, and then the debt of the village, which is on page 13 out of 15 or page 10 of the document, and that goes through again. And I tried to make it a little bit clearer. Previous years, it just gave you the code. It didn't necessarily tell you this one is Stover. There was the Dodge lease, that's a pickup truck. The Jeep, that's the chief's car, which we've paid off since then. Vera, the F-150 for service, the Elbrook, Canterbury Angwood, F-250, I'm sorry, that's service, F-150 is police. And again, total of the amount of debt that we have. Most of those loans are 0%, or I should say most of the balance of those loans is at 0%, paid out over 20 years. That's OPWC, that's all of the road projects, which again, we have lots of good news about that. I mean, it's one good thing after the other when it comes to that, and fund balances. So this is not anything that should be a surprise. It gives you the amortization schedule of the above debt over the next year. I mean, it's really, we're talking about $63,000 over the next 23 and 20, including 22, 23 and 24. So again, no surprises there, but all in the interest of keeping very clear, open records. This is what the village is doing. This is how we're spending our money. It's all required by law anyway. So if you have any specific questions on the year end, I'm happy to go over that. It did go very smoothly. Paula and Carolyn were awesome in moving forward and getting things done on time. And being that it was my first year end, I was like really terrified. But it's once you rip that Band-Aid off, it wasn't even that bad. So.
Oh, we're glad to know that.
Just saying. What?
Glad you survived.
Yeah, well, I lost a few hairs, but
Yeah.
I guess the counseling helped. We are not improving therapy.
Yeah. That little thing he does once in a while now.
Did
it
you
didn't
want to
affect him
mention
at all.
that you had consulted with Andy too?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, I mean,
Yeah.
this was, it was throughout the process. I was consulting with Andy.
Sure.
Andy never came in, which was sad to me, but it's harder to get him in, but he was very helpful, very responsive. I think he was on vacation in Florida when I started asking him questions, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But he was very, very helpful, gave me the answers to all I had a few questions on a few outstanding items, and he was like, yeah, if you're not familiar with it, it's hard, but once you know what it is, it's all stuff that you already have done. So that was very helpful. Yeah, but that is essentially, that's the end of 22. So if there are any questions on fiscal year 22, speak now or forever, the next 7 years. No, I'm just kidding. Until the next 7 years.
Good
Hold
job.
your peace.
Excellent.
Thanks, sir. Okay, moving on to financial packet for February of 22. Again, I prepared this
23.
23. Good morning, everyone.
Need a cookie.
Panda shaped. So for the month of February 2023, the village had a combined bank balance of $3,078,778.94. That may seem significantly less, but that's also because we have not, until tomorrow, received our biannual real estate taxes, which will all come from the county. It's thankfully that we'll have plenty to report on next month about that once we do actually finally receive that. Of the amount, 2.43 million, just over, can be found in the village's primary checking account, while the balance resides in several village dedicated funds. Again, for the month, the village generated $92,000 in general fund income tax receipts. That is higher, about 10% higher than previous year. And we've collected $161,000 in general fund income tax receipts for the year. That's 5% higher than February 22. So again, I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to have a record-breaking year again, but we're off to a good start. We're certainly off to a good start. Like I said, the village has not received the first biannual disbursement of real estate taxes from the county. As for receipts, the village did receive $131,000 just north to the general fund. This number is $40,000 less than February 22. of 22. However, the last year, the village received a $45,000 pass-through grant from Hamilton County to pay for playground equipment. I'm sure everyone remembers that. So technically we're ahead, but on paper we're behind because we didn't receive that grant. But as long as it's less than $45,000 that we are short, that's a good thing. 11,130.72 was received through the DA program, totaling 69,691.19 for the year. That's just for February. That number has gone up. It will continue to go up. It is. I mean, this is finally we are seeing the fruits of this program. For the longest time, I think there was a lot of questions about the program. Is it worthwhile? Are we getting our money back? We're finally starting to see that money, and it's coming in. So it's good news. We are certainly on track to receive well over 200,000 for the year. 2022 did get us about a little over 200,000. So I have no reason to believe that it'll be less. But again, it's not my program. Just focusing on the trends. Top 5 main payment payees for the month for payroll, DPS, Ohio Police and Fire, Core and Main LP, and Rumpke. Core and Main, I believe, is the fire hydrants.
Correct.
So fire hydrants have been purchased for all of the village road projects. So that's a big number, but there are like 3 road projects going on right now or about to be going on. So all of that is kind of tied into that program. I think we heard from Mr. Putoff that some of the hydrants are so old that you actually have to have a converter to use them, and not all fire departments carry them.
Right.
Thankfully, DPS has them, but they are like really old fire hydrants. So, as for appropriations, the general fund spend for the month was $222,159.17. That figure is $13,553.93 more than February of fiscal year 22. Again, anytime we're under 45,000 for I mean, this is the last month this will be true, but as long as we were under $45,000 of spend less, so that's a good thing, right? That means that we just didn't spend all that money this year. Maybe last year there would be a question, why do we spend that much? But this year, even with the $45,000 payment to DPS, we're only over by $13,000. The village had 20 outstanding payments that total $30,217.59. That number includes the monthly payments to Jefferson Health Plan. That's a big number. I mean, 30,000 is pretty low compared to the last one I was just speaking with, over 100. But that's just, again, they just haven't cashed that check as of printing this February 28th. Village administration will continue to monitor appropriation spend and make any adjustments deemed necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Riddle.
My pleasure.
So we have, and that blends into appropriations adjustments for this evening.
Yes, for us. So we'll get into Star Fund in one moment. I apologize, I didn't pull that up right away. There is a request essentially for this year. So again, this is a unique year. I plan to have, after having a conversation with Jeremiah Cadill, who's the fiscal officer in Wyoming, he had said, we don't do reappropriations more than once, maybe twice a year. My goal is to do twice a year. At this point, I think it makes sense to do quarterly, just to make sure that we have our bearings and make sure that we're doing things in a clear, concise, and consistent accounting procedure. For this evening, it will be at full council, but I'm going to request that we have a reappropriation for a few smaller items, but one major item, which is DPS. So currently we have $137,500 allocated from the general fund to pay for DPS for the first 3 months. We did not appropriate any money from the fire levy to cover the rest of the year, namely because we didn't have a fire levy yet. We didn't receive that money. That money is incoming. We should have that in the next day or so. But the point is that we need to actually have that in appropriations. It's going to be in the amount of about 487 and change, I believe. I apologize, I don't have that number right in front of me. But the point being that we need to have that change in order to be able to cover DPS for the rest of the year, coming straight from the fire levy, instead of using any of the funds that we have from the separation agreement that we had from Little Miami, or any of the payments that we've received from them. that will continue, and we'll be over on that, and we'll have a balance that will be a remaining balance until the end of those receipts. But that is the request for this evening. There are a few other housekeeping items that need to be
Question on
taken
that.
care of. Yeah.
What is how many more payments do we have coming from Little Miami?
We received this year's.
There
Last
were
year's.
five
Five,
total, so we've now received 2.
Right.
And what is the amount of that?
105,000 roughly, just north of that.
But
So,
we also have to think that in 3 years, we're gonna have to re-up the DPS, right? So
right,
roughly 3 years, we'll start a DPS negotiation, right?
right.
So there's a 3% increase in the third and the fourth year of the contract DPS. So we have to prepare for that.
Right.
So
So we'll have enough in the reserve to cover that for those 2 years, 3 years. Problem is gonna be after that.
Yes.
Meaning once the Little Miami, we're running a surplus of about $25,000 a year, which is about 5% of our contract. Is that right? Yeah, it's about 5% of our contract, 550,000. So that'll help us ride for a couple of years. Once they increase, it'll cover it's going to cover the gap, because there is a gap as is, and then it'll probably cover us for a year or two. Question will be after that.
Also, the soft billing is way higher than we anticipated originally.
It's way higher, and way higher than DPS thought it was going to be.
Yes.
Correct. So if it's way higher, then the question is, if once this opens for negotiation, we have a strong hand that they are making a lot of money off the soft billing.
So I think that would be a conversation with them.
Yeah, you
Because-
can, except you can't always count on that. That'll be one of their counters will be, you can't always count on that soft building. Because that's.
But we can take responsibility for
You could.
If we know this time we'll take responsibility for up to 60,000, right? Then we know that we're always hitting way more than that, and we can say, listen, we'll guarantee more.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be less for us.
That's how we did it. Yeah, that was the way we negotiated with Amber back in the day, because their receipts were really good.
So that'll be a conversation I think we have to have with them at a certain point. I mean, as of now, they are certainly reaping the benefits, and good for them. They certainly took a risk with us. We didn't know what the numbers were. Nothing was very clear at that time. But now that things are clear, I think that there's a conversation that can happen there. That just, we have to get to that point. I don't know that we're there necessarily.
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So those are the main items. Because we have had a significant amount of DEA receipts, the nature of that fund is to also not just offset the salary, but also to allow certain enhancements to the department. So the clerk's office, I don't know if you guys have ever actually had to go to the clerk, but it was very dark, and it's a little bit. It needed a more than just a fresh coat of paint. So there are a few other items in there that are for new furniture and for renovations of that office, as well as some additional trainings that the PD has been taking part of.
Yes,
Taking part
it
in.
all helps. Very good.
So that will be a recommendation to council.
Thank you, Eric, for the report, those reports, and getting us up to date. The next on the agenda is we have a discussion on the travel per diem policy. I'd like to put both sides of the coin on the table for discussion. We'll all understand what's going on here and see if what everyone, my colleagues have to say about it. The police department has been complaining that they want to have when they take trainings and go out for other different meetings and things like that. A lot of times what happens is that the police department one night will go out to fancy restaurant or something like that, and it's a very good way to build up friendship with other police departments and other colleagues, but they don't have the capability of doing that because they don't have a budget that they could go ahead and count in. And they're complaining that just regular meals and stuff like that is not being covered. This is their complaint, and therefore they set forth that they would really like to have a per diem policy that would allow them to have $59 to $69 a day for when they travel. Now, what they could do with that means is that, let's say they're going for a week, they get that amount for every day. They could decide if they want to eat 3 days, little, cheap takeout food, and one day spend it all in a fancy restaurant, or do what they want to do with it. It covers their sleep and it covers whatever they want to do. They could decide if there's a surplus, they get to keep it. They could go ahead and sleep on the streets and then pocket the money. There's no way we could control the money once it goes to
So question, this 59 or 69, this is in addition to the hotel, or hotels is a separate thing, right? Their hotels are paid.
So as far as I understood,
Yes.
it's going to switch, meaning now the hotels are covered as reimbursement, correct?
No, it's the hotel is a direct payment through the village credit card. Any that's not the word.
Not incendiary.
Incidental expenses are reimbursed through the expense report. This would take that piece away.
Okay,
So-
so this is just the per diem for
So they would
miscellaneous.
submit an expense
The
report.
actual payment for the hotel would stay the same, or now it's going to come off for the per diem?
It would stay the same. This, the per diem is in addition to the hotel cost.
Hotels can be $100.
Okay.
What is the reimbursement policy
One second.
currently?
So now, let's put the second side on the table before we have.
Well, let's make sure we're all clear about what's covered. This per
Right,
diem
so
thing is
now,
not-
so this is what they're complaining, this is what they are saying.
That's a request.
What we have in place right now is, we officially have a reimbursement policy. That if they go ahead and use and spend money, we, the administration, will take the receipts and pay them back. Is that, am I saying it?
Correct.
They claim there's no such policy. We claim that we told them about it. They claim they never saw it. And they claim that as of now, the previous meetings that they went to, the previous trainings they went to, they couldn't go out and mingle with other police for fancy meals because they didn't have their per diem. But the truth is, really, there is a place so they're claiming they don't know about it. We claim that we do have it. So now we have this back and forth. It's very clear that we all know exactly where we're standing, what's going on here between the police department and the administration.
What is the policy on reimbursement? Is it a cap or?
It's actual reimbursement. So there
So
are
they
no
could have
limits.
gone to a fancy restaurant and asked for a reimbursement?
We will reimburse it, yeah.
So their words to that is that it's not a guaranteed reimbursement. It's up to the administration to decide, hey, you know what? That was a little bit over our budget, we're not covering it. And
That's not true.
that's true, but that's what, I'm
I
putting
understand.
both sides
I
on the table.
understand there's a disconnect.
I don't have any
I understand.
pull to any
I know.
side, I'm just putting it that we'll have to be on the same page of, wow, the administration know what they're saying, again, that's our job, to make sure everybody's on the same page. We're gonna come up with a way to get everybody on the same page, but again, Ron is doing his work, there's somewhere, a loose link somewhere here, and that's what they're saying. So we have to know if our option is to go ahead and go into the per diem, or do we want to just strengthen what policies we have in place?
I think there needs to be a department head meeting if there's a missing link somewhere.
Yeah,
This
it sounds like it's a non-issue. I mean, it's misunderstanding, but if they
So,
sit down, they understand everything's been paid.
so I did an extensive amount of traveling in my previous life, and per diem makes sense because you are counting pennies
Mhm.
sometimes. And if we don't have restrictions on the kinds of things that they are spending the per diem on, it makes our life easier because we're not counting the pennies and we're not checking. On the other hand, this is public tax dollars that we're spending,
Mhm.
so it should be monitored. But the federal government reimburses $59 currently per diem per day. We follow the federal government guidelines for reimbursement on mileage. And my concern is if we do this policy, this should be for everybody. This is not just a police department,
Mhm.
which is the problem that we have. The police department likes to operate outside the village. Under our umbrella, they are here because council gives them the ability to be here and operate.
Mhm.
So there needs to be a universal policy that goes for all of the employees in the village. My concern that council needs to weigh in on this is a change, in how we're doing business. It's accountability to the residents, because there could be information out there that somebody did have a dinner somewhere at some point in time. But as long as we have the documentation and as long as we have a specific policy for how we are implementing this, I think there are pluses to doing this. I take issue with the fact that they say that there is no program currently. That's not true. We sign expense reports for the chief and for the sergeant all the time and for the lieutenant. So I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Another point that they wanted to say why they want the per diem over a reimbursement is because reimbursement, they have to pay
Front
for
it.
up.
They have to, front it.
And the other way, per diems, we will give them the money in advance. This way they could go ahead and spend the money.
So it can create a financial problem for someone who's on a tight budget, who's traveling. And I can see where that would be the case in some situations, depending on how long they're going to be. To me, that's a plus to go to the per diem system to be able to deal with that.
It also makes less work having to write reimbursement checks, et cetera. So,
Well, and the other piece of this too is that this has to be accountable in the chief's budget.
mhm.
So one of the things that the chief said to us was, well, this is my money, I'm accountable for it, why can't I spend it however I want to spend it? That's true, but I think council needs to be aware of this policy and needs to agree or disagree in terms of doing this type of reimbursement.
Okay.
Does the federal government also limit or have requirements of when the people qualify for per diem? For example, if there is a 3-hour conference in Columbus, you don't qualify, or do you?
I think it's anything with an overnight stay.
Right.
But I mean, if you're there from 9 to noon in the morning and then come back the next day,
I can't
Doing
do
a-
that.
You're thinking,
Generally, the government, including the military, they work on orders.
mhm,
So you have an order to be someplace, then it's considered a per diem allowed. So if you go somewhere in town, but you don't have orders that you're doing it, per diem doesn't apply. In other words, that they do have some distinction of when per diem is.
mhm. Yeah, I think we do need a policy like that, you know.
Done anything on policy of that yet, right?
no.
So
Maybe, right, but not necessarily the military branch, but maybe when they send their EPA attorneys
We
somewhere.
definitely have something written up,
Yeah.
and then we can go through it and see what's common practice with per diem amongst other governments.
Mhm.
Because that is the core of the per diem thing. Is if I'm out of town, drivable for a day, I may be gone for 18 hours.
And what do we
Gonna
do?
have maybe lunch and dinner. So
Mhm.
do you qualify for the per diem or do you submit
May-
expenses? And once you go per diem, there's no expense report.
Right,
correct.
It's per diem.
but,
Otherwise you get into the muck we're sort of in right now, apparently.
mhm,
Well, the other
Understand.
complication too is that the leadership in the police department have fleet cards for fuel man to fill up on gas. So when they're using a fleet card, if it's Forrest with the canine car traveling somewhere, that's not reimbursable. That's a direct expense that's being paid for by the village. Same thing is true with the chief's car. He has a fleet card on his vehicle also. So what our approach would be is if council is in favor of implementing a per diem policy, we need to write some specific guidelines that are related to when you qualify for per diem and how it's actually paid.
right.
Because I think we can use the same expense form that we currently use,
What's the
but
argument? We're done.
it
Right?
needs to be modified.
Usually this is
Yeah.
what it
Just
is.
to put it in perspective, that was a good point, Ashley, with regard to putting together a policies where when they can use per diem and when not. To put it in perspective in dollar signs, we're talking about under $5,000 a year based on the average of training that they're doing. It's not that much of a crazy stretch.
Should we care if, say, there is an emergency or an illness, so they're not able to go, but the per diem was advanced? Whether or not, how we get that back?
I think that our reimbursement program should just stand until we're ready with this policy.
No, I'm saying we advance the per diem, but then they can't go for whatever reason. What do we do in that case?
I think it needs to be repaid.
Needs to be repaid?
Yeah,
Okay,
that'd be part of the guide.
So just, there was, I have a little bit of notes on the per diem. I haven't put together a formal policy, but essentially, to your question, if the person left at 11 o'clock, but they missed breakfast, so breakfast is worth 25% of the per diem, lunch is 25%, and then dinner is 50%. So if it would go based on meals, the
that makes
person,
sense. Or if part of the conference lunch is provided, you know.
right, then that, it would only make sense that would be reduced to 75%.
Is that correct, or is it just per diem?
No, this
You're gonna-
is how it's
you're
broken
gonna
down
portion
from
that
the,
out?
this is from the General Services Administration.
Okay.
So,
Well, I mean, my guess is there are a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah.
Because they may go to a local seminar and there's no reason why they would get paid per diem there if they're just down the road. So
Yeah.
exactly.
my guess is there's a lot of factors that govern when they're gonna get per diem or not, which,
Right, no, I'm just throwing on a couple of
I understand.
factors for that question, but there's certainly more.
but to develop a policy, that is what I'm talking about. We would put in the factors that
Correct.
would dictate when per diem's appropriate, when it's not.
Alright, so do we have a motion, and are we all on the same page that we should go ahead with the per diem and have a motion that the solicitor and administration should work together on a draft?
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have passed to hand over the
It's been
solicitor
handed over.
and the administration to come up with guidelines for the per diem and hand it back to us.
Okay.
Next, our fund deposit increase. We have, Eric has some good news about that.
Where's my money?
Well, if you're asking me where it is, it's a lot more in Huntington Bank. So, what we thought about, and this is kind of in conversation, I think we've played with this idea, we've spoken about this in previous councils. There's a lot of money sitting in our bank account right now. And I'm not saying to move everything, but what I am saying is that we just got authorized a 20-year loan for Elbrook in the amount of $707,000, which we were expecting to pay out of pocket. So that's really exciting.
That's a freebie.
That's a 20-year loan at 0%. So that's money that we do not have to pay right now. We should be putting our money in the Star Fund and making at least 3.5% interest, which is about where the Star Fund is right now. So what I did with Mr. Hurt's approval was I moved $1 million from the general fund into the Star Fund, which puts us at 1.5 million, just about 1.57 million in the Star Fund. So we'll see significant interest increases on that balance. It's already starting for for the end of April, since that was only done a couple of days ago. There is.
I didn't hear, what's the S amount? What was it?
We currently
1.5.
1.5.
Yeah.
What's the?
Is our current.
The interest is a little over 3 currently.
How much is
in one just now.
in numbers?
I just put in an additional million, so it's $1.57 million. Which, when you go to the bank and call ahead of time and say, I'm going to do a bank transfer of $1 million, they're like, oh. And I'm like, I know. But that was accomplished already a couple of days ago. I have a working relationship with Kara Reed, who's the bank manager at the Seymour location of Fifth Third, where we do business. So there was one other piece there. Oh, so what Miss Reed did point out to me, though, and something that I feel that it would be a good idea. I'm assuming that this makes the most sense, but again, I just wanted to make sure that council's aware of something like this before I would do it. Make sure that we have everyone on board. Is we will still have about $2 million in our bank account once we receive this money from the county. The thought is to open a business savings account with Fifth Third, which is guaranteed 3% interest until September. You can do about 20 transactions a month. If we would do it like the DEA fund, we're probably talking about maybe 1 transaction a month, maybe 2. at most, probably more like once every couple months, something quarterly. That way we can, again, maximize the interest on the money that's sitting in our account right now. Another 3%. I mean, if we have $2.5 million sitting at 3%, it's a whole lot better than 500,000. I thought it's a no-brainer, but again, it's a lot more money.
The question is, the Star Fund is probably backed by the government if the bank would go bust.
So it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that past $250,000. I don't.
The Star Fund, you know, recovered past $250,000.
What is the Star Fund?
The Star
I really
Fund is
don't
an
know.
investment
It's a bank
account from
It's a bank account. Where?
with Huntington Bank,
Huntington?
but it's a state of Ohio program.
It's-
Okay, because there's a statute that governs what you can and cannot invest in. It's basically a lot of just more conservative types of
Yeah, no,
investments.
these are like all. I mean, I think Matt Betcher, when he was on council, had looked into this pretty significantly, as well as Mr. Lanzer. And this is pretty much any municipality that has investments, they have some money in the Star Fund.
Okay.
This is pretty common practice.
All right.
So the question is in terms of the Fifth Third savings, but that's a good question. I don't know what the rules are with Fifth Third savings account, because it might be that it's not pooled.
Yeah.
Whereas we know that the Star Fund money, well, it probably is pooled because our money in Fifth Third is pooled already.
Okay.
So I would assume that it's the same, but I can check into that. Again, it's not something that I'm moving forward with until I get some feedback.
So, yeah, you could look into what the guarantees from the government if the banks do go bust, like we have seen. But that's not worth the risk if we move on. Or that's a discussion, we have to discuss if it's worth it or not. So that will be that.
Question, what's the benefit of using a business savings account versus
The
just putting that same?
Guaranteed 3%.
Right.
But we're already, are we not guaranteed in the Star Fund, is that why?
We are, it's just you have to transfer the money, meaning I have to go to the bank and transfer it and it gets there the next day. And then when we need that money back, we have to go to the bank and it gets there the next day. Whereas this puts the same cushion that we would have in
Okay.
Fifth Third, and Paula can just click in
So it's
and
Fifth
transfer it over.
So it's an accessibility convenience. And then what's the max on the Star Fund that we can put in? Is there a max?
No limit.
And so the max at Fifth Third would probably be whatever, FIDC.
Well, that would be, again, if we would
I
go
would
with, if we would go with this level of caution, which I certainly would appreciate and recommend, but I don't know that we're allowed to invest in things that are not pooled like that. I think that's a different set of rules. So that's something that,
Yeah, I think, again, it's not whether it's pooled or not. Pooling gives you some additional advantages and interest and so on.
Right.
It's really more the risk factor that the states.
okay, I thought the pool was part of that, so
Well, I mean, it is. I'm sure the state's more comfortable with that.
Right.
But it doesn't limit you to that.
Okay.
Okay, in other words, they're conservative, and it's a very involved statute. It addresses all of the factors that they look at for investments.
You have given the DEA fund as an example that perhaps could be moved over. I would assume that would be Chief's choice at the end, since that's,
Correct.
okay.
Correct.
And then and any interest from any given fund has to stay in that fund.
In the fund that it
So
came
that's-
from.
yeah.
So where our money for the general fund is pooled in the same bank account as the road fund, as the police levy, as everything. So they'll receive interest in the percentage of the fund that they were when they contributed.
Okay,
And so the same thing would be true in the DA fund, being that it's a standalone fund in a separate bank account.
right.
All of the interest would go back into that fund.
Mhm. So maybe we'd want to, if we were gonna go that route, do two and one with a
Correct,
separate
we would
bank.
have to open it up. Well, it would be just another Star Fund. The
Just
Star
a-
Fund has another account we can open.
Interesting.
Yeah, or if we wanted to move it into the Fifth Third business savings and we wanted to only put the DEA fund in there, that would also be an option.
Are there other interests or investment opportunities that municipalities take advantage of, like
Certainly.
CDs or
Yeah, certainly.
anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to Amberley, I think they have $5 to $6 million in investments beyond their reserve, beyond what they have in the Star Fund.
I think perhaps diversifying would be good as far as,
It's just more risk. That's where we have only gotten to the point where we have a reserve now, and we have, we're in good shape. The reason why they can diversify and why they can have so many more investment opportunities, they have the history of that, and they've had those for a lot longer. But as we continue to grow, and as we, hopefully continue to build our reserve, I would certainly hope that we get to the point where we can diversify and have some significant investments to ensure long-term
Gold
financial
coins?
stability.
Cool. Good point, yeah. So this all started based on the Elbrook reimbursement money, right?
Correct. It was,
So
once we saw that.
Somewhere
we said,
on the
this
books,
is-
you're carrying that 20 years we owe.
Correct, but that's, I mean,
I know, we have to keep
yeah,
that.
exactly. No, I mean, so we have a separate spreadsheet tracker, which I inherited from Anna Gideon, and that breaks down all of the expenses. It ends up being like $20,000 a year again. But in that case, it'll be about probably $40,000 a year. But it's all pretty easy to track. And with what we have coming in on the road levy, that more than covers it at this point. Puts us ahead for future road projects.
Thank you. The next finance committee meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 17th at 6:30. And next we have a request to go into executive session. That means that all visitors will have to stand outside while we discuss matters of elected or appointed official compensation.
do you want to make that motion?
So a motion to go into executive session to discuss compensation of elected and appointed officials.
I'll second.
All in favor, roll call.
Second by Ms. Snyder. Yeah, roll
Yes.
call. My apologies.
This is where we just feel like we're talking.
Okay.
Yeah. We should make really big hand motions while we're in here.
Hey, David,
So, Mr. Fisher,
are
you,
we invited?
I would have a motion to allow executive committee and mayor to stay.
so Mr. Krudnoff and I need to leave the room.
Yes.
So the elected officials will be in here with Mr. Butler for this discussion.
Okay, so we'll go with the roll call.
Our elected officials will have to stay in the.
It depends.
If we invite them.
Okay.
Anybody can be in an executive session that you want.
If you invite them.
As long as you
Have, did you do roll call yet?
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Knipp,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Ms. Snyder.
Yes.
See ya.
And I would like to have a motion to allow the mayor and Mr. Van Horn to remain.
Motion to allow.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Do I need to record those? Who's
No.
included?
No, because we're in executive session now,
Executive.
Oh,
so.
there you go. Okay.
Are we dark on